Hello, friends, and welcome to Page Stream. My name is Steve, and I'm here today with some friends. So, Sean, will you kick us off with an introduction, please?
Hello, everybody. I'm Sean Pratt. I am an audiobook narrator of almost 30 years now. I've narrated over 1,100 books in just about every genre you can imagine. My background is in theater. I was a classical theater actor for about 20 years. And then toward the end of that, when I was getting into my mid-30s and early 40s, I transitioned into doing audiobooks and just fell in love with the storytelling aspect of it. And now I narrate both fiction and nonfiction, and I coach other narrators on how to do it, how to become an audiobook narrator, as well as help authors who want to be brave enough to narrate their own material. So that's what I do.
That sounds scary. And Stephen.
Yes, I'm Stephen Guglich. I'm the author of the Veil Saga. The first book is called Piercing the Veil. And so when I'm not writing, I am spending time with my family, and I'm also managing a school of middle schoolers as a principal. I've been in education for almost 30 years, and I've been writing for almost 20 years. And I published my first book on March 31st of 2023.
Wow. What was that like I always wonder, what is it like to have so many years working on something, or at least brewing in your brain, and you finally hit that publish button? What is that
It's
like?
surreal. It's like you're almost numb when you realize it's happening. It's quite a roller coaster, but, and I took so long to write it, not only because of the limited time that I had to write, but I also did a lot of background development, with what we in the industry call world building,
Mm-hmm.
and that took a long time. I did a lot of, I wrote the history of the world. I wrote the cultural synopsises for all the races and all sorts of things.
It makes me a little bit sad when I hear about world building, because I know that you work so hard on building this world that we don't always know about all the details that you've made behind the scenes. So it's a little sad that we don't see all of that work that went into it. We just see the kind of like there's an iceberg, and below the surface of the water, there's a whole world we don't get to see.
That's a fantastic analogy. Yeah, it is kind of bittersweet, but for me, that's the fun part. I've always been a creative. I'm not the kind, I can't just sit around and do nothing. I have to be doing something, and when I'm doing something, it's usually creative. If I'm not writing, I'm building or fixing something, or playing a game with my kids or something. I just can't sit idle. So the world building for me, though, really satisfied the creative aspect of just coming up with these races and what they, why they believed what they believed, how they interact with each other, how they interact with other races. That was always fascinating to me. And I think it really paid off, even though, like we were saying, it's bittersweet. But one of the comments that I get a lot about people who have read Piercing the Veil is they could tell that the world building is very detailed. So, you get the tip of the iceberg, but you got a nice tip. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So what is Piercing the Veil about? How would you describe it?
Well, it stems from the idea of, how all these cultures all over the world, they have legends of mythologies and talks about magic and different creatures that exist. And then all of a sudden, here we are in the modern 19th, 20th, 21st century, and we don't talk about that. And, it's become a thing of fantasy. So I started with the question of, where did the magic go? And that's what Piercing the Veil is ultimately all about. Is it's the origin story of myths and legends and what happened to them. And so there's this veil that separates them from the humans, and there's a portion of history that happened where that separation took place. It's not like an alternate universe or a shadow world or anything like that. There's a literal veil around their different cities, and the Veil Saga explores what happens when people start to pierce the veil, and that's why the first book is called Piercing the Veil. So there's a couple of characters in the first book that that go on an adventure to learn more and pierce the veil. And I don't like giving away too many spoilers, but that's kind of the idea there.
No, that's perfect because I tend to not even read a synopsis a lot of the times. I'll just avoid as much as I can and just get a general idea. So that's perfect for me. Yeah. So I wanted to congratulate both of you for the nomination for the audiobook.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Talk about surreal. I mean, Sean and I were just totally blown away by that.
It was interesting too, because one of the things that what I teach my students is that when they work on a project that they're personally excited about, one-on-one with an author, is I walk them through how to get the author on board about really promoting the book. You know, I'm an author myself. I've written a nonfiction piece called To Be or Wanna Be. It's for actors about getting into the world of show business. And, you know, the thing is, like Stephen said, when you hit the final return button and it's going to be published, it is surreal. But that's only the beginning of the journey. You know, a lot of authors, there's always that analog of writing a book is like birthing a child, right? For X number of months, you work on this thing, it gestates, it grows, and then you birth it, and they think, oh, good, whew, I'm done. No, you're not done. What if you want to continue the analogy? What happens after the baby is born? It's 24/7 from then on, and you cannot rely on a publisher to promote the project. I mean, they'll do a cursory, press release or two on social media, but you're just one of 20 books that came out that week or whatever, And it really requires a focused marketing strategy. And I was really grateful that Stephen gave me a book to work on that was so well written, and he was really amenable to pushing the promotion on it, because it is important to get the word out. Think about, since the time Stephen published it, how many fantasy books have come out, right? Mm-hmm. Or how many have come out that you've never heard of or will never hear of, unless the author really takes the reins. And I appreciate that a lot of people don't understand even where to start. And that's what, different author groups are for on, say, Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever. But one of the things that I push my students to do is talk with the author. If you really like the project and you think you did a good performance, talk with them about the different audiobook-related awards that are out there, or events, I should say. And one is the Voice Arts Award, the SOVAS. That's the Society of Voice Artists Society, something. I'm sorry, it's been a long day. But anyway, so SOVAS, there we go. And it's sort of it's a huge event, because they don't only do audiobooks, they do everything from commercial VO, foreign voices, cartoons, video games, you name it, right? And I warned Steve at the time. I said, now look, here's how we can submit it for fantasy, for that category. But be ready, because fantasy, sci-fi, and murder mystery are the leading audiobook categories, and they get lots and lots of submissions. So yeah, let's do it, but don't get your hopes up too high, because there's going to just be a huge number of people who submit. And so Stephen's right. When we got the nomination, I was teaching in the middle of it, and suddenly my phone blew up. All my students were like, "Congratulations, congratulations!" I'm like, "What is going on here?" And then Stephen even did that. He's like, "Oh my God, it happened!" And I was flummoxed. I mean, honestly, not that I didn't believe in the project. But like I said, when you've got like several hundred submissions for that one category, to get the nomination is a big deal. And I'm really happy for Stephen, because hopefully this will, obviously increase sales and visibility. Hopefully it'll give him the impetus to get book 2 done. You still owe me book 2, young man.
I'm working on it.
And so to continue the saga, because this could very well become something that's really wonderful, ongoing. I can't wait for book 2 for him to deliver it. But this is a big, win in the sale, and this could also help his own long-term writing career. So yeah, it was. We were both flummoxed by it, and we're both really excited by the possibility of winning.
Yeah, definitely. So, Stephen, what is that feeling like when I'm sure you were excited to be nominated, but did you feel any pressure that, oh, I better get to work, I better get to work on book two and get it
Well,
out quicker? Or was there any pressure?
well, there's always pressure to get book two out. I mean, I put that pressure on myself because I'm excited to get it done. But the pressure for me was, okay, so how do I promote this now? Okay, we got this
Mm,
nomination now. Do I try to solicit the judges to try to sway them, or
Yeah.
what do I do? How do I, and Sean's like, hold up, hold the reins, and I'm like, okay, so just tell me what I need to do.
That's right. So don't send them gift cards to Olive Garden or something.
Right.
That's not going to work.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't. Yeah, just so you know, Steve, what happens is you submit a short sample of the book. Like I think it was 5 minutes, wasn't
Yep.
it, Stephen?
Yep.
5 minutes of the piece. And
oh, wow.
I told Stephen, I said, find a really exciting segment to submit to get their attention. And so he picked the one he wanted that he felt was fit the bill. And if they like the segment, they go to a committee, and they're different judges for different committees of different ones. And if they like it, then they assign a judge to listen to the whole thing, or actually the panel of five. They listen to those top 5 or 6 ones. So they all listen to the same piece, and then they score it accordingly. But yeah, just getting the recognition was, like I said, I'm still so happily surprised that we got nominated. It's wonderful, just wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the next step for you, Stephen, to kind of spread the word and let everyone know about the nomination? People who
Well,
aren't
I
familiar with it.
immediately just posted about it on all my social media accounts, and Sean did the same, and then I just sent out press releases or inquiry letters, just like the one that I sent you,
Yeah.
so pretty much, trying to make them more personable, because, I wouldn't just send it to somebody I didn't listen to, or I didn't, I wasn't sure about. I'd want to make sure that it was, was somebody compatible with what we did. And, and I just sent out a whole bunch of inquiry letters to podcasters, newspapers, and like I said, just spread it all out on social media, and hoped and prayed that some people would answer them.
We were trying to get a
It-
float in the Macy's Day Parade, but that didn't work out
Yeah,
for cost
no.
reasons. So just throw that out there.
Didn't fit in the budget.
Yeah.
One day.
One day.
That's right.
Yeah.
So so Stephen, when you have the book finished and you decide, okay, we're to produce the audiobook, what is that process like? Do you seek out certain narrators? Do you have auditions? Do people submit samples to you? What was that process like
Well,
for
for
you?
me, I had an idea of what I wanted, because I wanted the voice of the narrator to fit the voice of the main character, and I had some lots of fame.
Hi guys, I need to talk to you.
Sorry.
He's a busy guy,
Yeah.
Stephen is. He's got people
Yeah, it's
from
okay.
Yeah. So I had to find somebody whose voice fit the main character, and then I listened. I just listened to other audiobooks, and I really liked. I had some of my favorite audiobook narrators like Michael Kramer and Nick Podell, and I even sort of reached out to them, but their voice just didn't. I didn't think their voices worked for what I was going for. So then I decided, okay, I'm gonna try some different books out there, and I just started listening to different narrators, and I came across. As a little palate cleanser, I decided to listen to a Western, and lo and behold, I found Sean Pratt as Lloyd James, his AKA, and I was like, oh man, he this I hear his voice, and I can almost hear it as the main character Jeremy, and then he could do so many other voices in the story, and that's when I was like, okay, yeah, this is it. So I took the chance, and I reached out to Sean, and we just talked about it, and he said, well, told me how picky he was about what he works on. So he asked for the manuscript, and at that time I had only done, I was on the fourth edit, the final. So the final edit hadn't been done by the my editor, and the rest, I guess, Sean, you can take it from there, because that was
so yeah. So that, just like there's not every actor fits every part, not every voice fits every book. So Michael Kramer is a friend of mine. I've known Michael since I first started narrating almost 30 years ago, and he's got this great, smooth, like bourbon baritone, right? But he has an older voice, and Jeremy is a younger character. And, it's important that you, just from a casting perspective, I can tell you, in fiction, and also nonfiction, but especially in fiction, you want the narrator's voice. That's your center. So man or woman, whatever their age, that voice is the center of the piece. So you want your protagonist to have their voice, right? And Jeremy's, he's a younger guy, and I've been graced with, I have a very young sounding voice. Even though I'm much older than the character, I still sound in that right age range. And then it's about, maybe the vibe I give off when I narrate or perform. And so when Stephen came to me with the piece and I looked it over, I was immediately excited. I just thought the storyline was really clever, and we no spoilers here, but that what happens with our central character, or his storyline, is really, I've never read a book like that before. And I was like, oh, this is good. It's very uplifting. It's very positive. It's exciting. And then because of my background as a theater actor, I love to play with character voices. And what's nice about when you do sci-fi and fantasy, I tell my students, the more fantastical the genre, the more liberties you can take with the character voices. Because it's when you think about like Lord of the Rings or Star Trek or whatever, you can have stronger choices in the accent and sound of a character as opposed to a modern drama, as it were, like a mystery or something. I immediately just fell in love with the story just the first time I read through it. And I was excited that he reached out, and we hashed out all the details. And I remember it was over Christmas. It was about a year ago, wasn't it?
2 years ago now. Yeah.
yeah. But for me, so I sat down and I, over a Christmas break, I just read the whole thing by the fireside, as it were, and I was, laughing and chuckling and making notes, and like, this is going to be great, And it was. It turned out into when you're reading a piece of fiction, you have to read the whole thing, obviously. To know that the mystery voice in chapter 4 is so and so in chapter 12 or whatever. And you're also thinking about casting the voices. So, for instance, our sort of semi-villain of the piece, I was having trouble sort of locating what kind of voice he had until I had a conversation with Stephen. And he told me who he had based that character off of. And I was like, oh my God, I know that guy. And suddenly, boom, it happened. It locked in.
It was perfect.
And the voice just took off. It just took off, yeah. And so, you when you cast as a performer, you cast the voices. So sometimes you cast it by like, oh, that sounds like my brother-in-law, or that's the lady at the grocery store, or whatever. Or, sometimes you just use the adjectives described in the piece. And so you cast all those voices from people you know. And of course, the listener doesn't know that. They just know that the voices are individual. But from your perspective, you can mimic their way of speaking, and it gives all of those people very unique voices. So, for instance, we have the elf who's our
Mercurio,
who helps. Yeah, I cast him as Errol Flynn in my head. So I gave him this slight British accent, this kind of, he even has a little mustache in my mind, and he's very suave, and he's like, hello, how are you? And so, once you lock in on that voice, it's solid every single time you bring it up in the piece, So that's, and once again, Stephen wrote really clear characters. And that's his world building that really does show off in that moment.
So for different voices, Stephen, are you consulted on different voices and what they sound like, or do you just kind of give guidance and let the narrator, in this case Sean, kind of
that
navigate his way
that was
through?
really one of the fun parts, and where Sean and I really started to jive, where we could feel the teamwork there, and we just talked through each of the different voices, especially of the different races and what they sounded like. There's dwarves in the book, but I didn't want them to have Scottish brogues or anything like that. I thought that, so we kind of went into we talked about that. And then Sean gives me homework to do. I'm like, what? So then he has me go through every single name in the book that's foreign, and record like an audio dictionary of on how to pronounce every single one, which I really appreciated. Yes. I wasn't expecting it, but I really appreciated it, because one of the things that really just burns my toast when I'm listening to an audiobook, especially when you have like multiple narrators, and one narrator pronounces the voice, the name one way, and then the next narrator pronounces the voice the name a different way, or even if the same narrator, in one chapter says, pronounces it one way, and then decides 5 chapters later that he's going to pronounce it a different way, and it takes me out of the enjoyment of the book. So and that was one thing that I didn't even have to tell Sean that was a pet peeve of mine. He kind of, I don't know if he picked up on it or if it's a pet peeve of his own, but that's what I really enjoyed working with him, is the perfectionism that we both had for producing a really quality audiobook.
You want to do that kind of research for every fiction piece. For instance, right now, I'm about to start a book about the American Revolutionary War and how the Americans drove the British out of the South, like the Carolinas and Georgia. So you generate a word list and you go over it with the author, okay? And those are factual names, so you're working with that. But especially in a fiction piece, especially fantasy or sci-fi, how do you say the princess of blah, 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 and the high priest of blah, 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 or whatever, how do you say that? And I just need to know, so I'm writing it out phonetically, so it's consistent. So I've got a file, so the next book, I'll refer back to it, and then I'll also go back and listen to the entire book I did before for those audio samples, because you're going to have characters that reappear, and you want to make sure that they are consistent for the listener, because when you listen to a series, whoever does it, you sort of fall in love with the writer and the performer, and you want those voices to be consistent across the series. And it's something I haven't gone to a writers' conference in a while, but one of the things I really drill into fiction writers is, when you make a decision about a character, make it early on. Tell us how they speak. Do they have a Scottish brogue? Are they shy? Are they from New York? Are they aggressive? And early on, tell us that, and then we can be consistent. Don't have a neutral character that in book 4 becomes the lead, and then you tell me they're Scottish. After 3 books of them just being a neutral character, and I appreciate the fact that when fiction writers start, they're not thinking 4 books down the line necessarily. Right? But I literally did have that. I did a Civil War series. It was like 8 or 10 books I did for Blackstone Audio. And I had a character who was just this little in and out character through like the first 4 or 5. And in book 6, it was revealed he was Scottish. And of course I had to commit to that. But that means in all the other ones, he was this sort of random Southern guy who suddenly acquires a brogue, But having that conversation with the author makes all the difference in the world. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
I would imagine choosing a narrator and having that relationship between the author and the narrator is very important, because I can't tell you how many times I've been listening to an audiobook, and I keep thinking, if I were reading this book, I think I'd like it a lot more. Something about the narration, the voices, or the cadence, or the tone just didn't work for me, but
Yeah.
when I go and I read it, it works a lot better for me. So it must be a little nerve wracking to make that choice on a narrator, knowing that that's how some people will experience the journey, experience the book, and not be reading it off the page.
Yeah, it is, and that's why you really have to find the right person. I've had several other authors ask me, what do I do? I want to record my own book, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that is
Oh,
not.
God.
Don't do that. This is okay. Yeah, you may have a great voice, and it might be good, but I mean, you're investing all this time and money and energy into producing a good book. Go the extra mile, make it polished, find somebody who really does a good job. And that's what I agonized on. I wanted to find that perfect person who I thought could read the book, could narrate the book, and pull off the voices. And that was what was really cool. As Sean was doing some samples, he actually recorded some samples for me for the Kickstarter, and it was just super exciting to hear. Just those. I think he just did he did 5 1-minute samples from various chapters, and just those alone just gave me chills. It was so cool to hear, the book actually coming to life, and the way he brought it to life, and that was super important. Going back to what we were talking about earlier with the names, at that time when he was just doing the samples for the Kickstarter, I hadn't made that lexicon of how to pronounce things, and so he was kind of just shooting from the hip. And some of the ways he pronounced the names, I actually that wasn't my intention, but it sounded so good, I just kept it that way, and I changed it in the story. Yeah, so.
Well, you have to be casting the right voice is really important, and just be okay. I have a little quick anecdote. So my first wife, back in the 90s, my first wife was an aspiring writer, and we lived in Manhattan, and during the summer of 92, so to be very specific, she told me, she said, listen, my writers group is going to go to Central Park. There's going to be a reading in the park near the Delacorte Theater. And I would love it, let's go. And I said, sure, let's do it. So we went that night with a bunch of her friends. And it's one of those places where you like put the blanket out and you have your wine and cheese and you listen under the stars. It was a lot of fun. But I think it was promoted by Politics and Prose, the bookstore there. Anyway, so the MC, she comes out and she introduces the first writer to read from their book. And this poor guy was so nervous. I swear to God, he was about to wet his pants. And so, he stuttered his way through it. And then the next person comes out and she was, she had rehearsed a bit of it, but she was so nervous that she just railed right through it. She just ran through it. The third guy, I think he had one too many cocktails and he was, to loosen him up. And then the fourth guy comes out and it's Tom Robbins. This really dates me, but he's the guy who wrote like Skinny Legs and All and Jitterbug Perfume and even Cowgirls Get the Blues. He's a really well-known Southern writer from the 90s. And out walks this courtly Southern gentleman who charms the audience and proceeds to perform from the book. And he was amazing. And so after the thing was done, we gather up, the group of us were walking back to our apartment in Midtown. And one of her friends, my wife's friends, said, so what'd you think, Sean? And I said, well, I've learned a really interesting lesson, which is it's one thing to write the book. It's another thing to perform the book. And of course they had jumped, oh, Mr. Classical Theater Man, blah, blah, blah. But I stuck to it. I said, look me in the face and tell me those first 3 people were entertaining. They weren't. And that was a clue years later when I got into audiobooks. The only yardstick that counts was the audiobook listening experience entertaining. That's it.
Yep.
And I know that's extremely subjective, but you can stack the odds in your favor as an author by really looking for the right performer who can deliver on the piece. Just because you wrote it and it's near and dear to your heart and whatever, I can respect that. I understand it. But now your ability to deliver on the performance of the thing you wrote, that's a different skill set. And if you're not good at it, it's going to kill your reviews, and it may have a longer-term effect on your career as a writer. I mean, nothing against Stephen, but if he had tried to do this himself, he may or may not have done a good job, right? Well, but nothing. But I'm just saying that, and that could have affected. Let's say he did it and it was terrible. Sorry, Stephen, but if it was, it may have affected his motivation to continue the series.
For sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And so that's it, like Stephen says, go the extra mile. And then this leads to the thing he said about the Kickstarter campaign. One of the things I suggested to Stephen, and I'm proud of him for doing this. I'm proud, like I'm your principal, Stephen. I tell my students all the time, I said, talk with the author about doing a fundraiser, like a Kickstarter, Patreon campaign kind of thing, because you can raise awareness about the book, you can raise the money to pay for the fee for the production, and then at the end of the day, the entire cost of an audiobook production is a tax write-off for the writer with the IRS, because the IRS considers the audiobook a promotional tool for the book. Back me up on this, Stephen.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So if you're on the fence as an author listening to this about should I spend the money, well, just know that if you do a fundraiser, that's money you didn't spend out of your own pocket, and the entire cost of it becomes a tax write-off. And there's so many really wonderful books out there that never get produced because the publisher won't commit the money to it. And the author is afraid because they have no idea what they're up to. But if you can, if you can write it off on your taxes and do a fundraiser, why not?
Yeah,
and that's what Stephen did.
Yeah, we lost nothing with the Kickstarter. It did nothing but give us much better notoriety and picked up people. I mean, if I had just launched the book on my own and done it, I mean, I don't know how many people would have actually, sure, my friends would have bought it, some family would have bought it, but I had people from Australia, Germany, Canada, buying books on Kickstarter. And I'm like, where are these people coming from? I mean, it was amazing, that it funded in 20 minutes. I was shocked.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was funny that day we did the Kickstarter. I love telling this story because here I am. I'm a principal. I probably should have taken the day off, but I didn't expect much, and I'm I honestly didn't expect much, and so I'm going through my day, and it's 11:30, and I finally look at my phone, and my phone is blown up. My wife is like, Have you seen it? Did you look? Why aren't you answering me? What's that? Where are you? I'm busy. I'm taking care of students and whatnot. So finally, my lunch break, I look and we were fully funded. Like I couldn't believe it in 20 minutes. It was amazing.
And that's why Stephen is doing this interview from his Learjet as it flies over Singapore as we're going.
Yeah,
but it's true. It's for the authors out there who are listening to this, you can do a fundraiser, and you can write it off on your taxes. Yep. So why not roll those dice? Find the right person, and like I said, for Stephen, it just raised awareness about the project, and it got more people on board, got people excited. So when the audiobook came out, they were primed for it.
Yep.
And that gets back to that thing about authors who finally publish their book and think, oh, I'm done. No, you're not done. Mm-mm. This is part of the job. This is part of the journey. If you really believed in this thing as much as you say you do, then you need to be willing to put the extra time in, So, and I'm so pleased that Stephen decided to go. Well, Stephen and his wife. Let's put the credit where credit's due.
That's for sure. Yeah, I definitely could not have done it without my wife. Yeah, she's my business manager. So, yeah.
There you go.
Yes. Yeah, and also the time it would take to record an audiobook, Stephen, if you were to record it yourself, it would take you away from book two.
That's for sure.
From writing. So it's it's time consuming. How long does it take to record an audiobook typically?
Well, broadly speaking, recording an audiobook is that metaphor about how do you eat an elephant, right? So when you're working as a narrator, one step is so eventually you develop a rhythm in your performance. And a professional narrator, you have a ratio of work time to finish time. So when I'm behind the mic, it takes me about 2 hours of work to generate one finished hour of audio that I then pass on to my proofer and my engineer, my team out of Seattle. And so from my end, it's a 2-to-1 ratio. And so what you do is when you work with an author, the first thing you ask is, what's the word count? I don't care about pages, because pages mean nothing. You can have 1 word on a page or 1,000 words on a page. So I asked Steve, what's the word count? He got it to me. And I know what my normal, what they call per finished word per hour is. So it's about 9,100 words per hour that I narrate, more or less. It's a ballpark figure. And so when I look at the thing, I said, this is going to be about 20 hours long. And so if I'm doing 1 finished hour a day, 20 hours, that's 20 days, and you're off and running. So you learned what your rhythm is, what your work schedule is from that. When you first start out, it's much longer. It takes a longer time to generate 1 finished hour of material. But and then it's just a matter of scheduling. And also when you have a really cool project to work on, like this one was, I don't want to do more than 1 hour a day. I'm not trying to rush it out the door. There was a time in my life for a long time, I was doing a book a week.
Wow.
Fiction or nonfiction. Yeah. It was I wasn't coaching at the time. And so I was doing 10 to 14 hours of material a week so I could do a book a week. And my life was recording and prepping, reading and performing. That was it. Because, I was married. We had 2 kids, trying to make the mortgage. But when you have a really special project like this one was, you want to take your time with it to get it right because your name's on it. And you want to go, I'm really proud of this one. This one as an artistic venture, it really challenged me. But yeah, so this one took about 3 weeks. I think about 3 weeks to do.
Which I thought was fast. to be honest,
well, yeah,
I was surprised at how fast you were getting it done.
Yeah, I've been doing this a while. So for me, the 2-to-1 ratio it's like I'm very type A. I'm very I'm all about time blocks and managing my focus and so on. So when I get behind the mic, I'm totally into it because I have 5 other things I need to do that day with my general career. So when I'm in the booth working on it, that's all I'm focused on. And that kind of intense focus, like when Stephen was writing the book, you were getting up like 4 o'clock in the morning to write this damn thing?
4 o'clock in the morning. That's the only time I have. Yeah.
Right. And I'm writing my second nonfiction book and I'm getting up at 6 to do the same thing. But when that 60 minutes, that's all I'm focusing on. So when I'm behind the mic with his piece, I know I've prepped it, I've made my notes on the text, and I'm off and running. And you take a little bite of it every day, and suddenly, oh my God, we're at the end. Oh my gosh, what happened? So, and then it's handed off to my engineer and his team. And then, and also just part of the process too, like I said, we did the fundraiser, so I was able to show Stephen, here's what the voices and the story is going to feel like. Mm-hmm. He gave me a couple notes and I incorporated those and then we're off and running. So.
Wow. Stephen, I have lots of people ask me or inquire about fundraising and Kickstarters, kind of how to approach that, what the best way to kind of like where to get started. What did you learn from that experience with the Kickstarter?
I learned a lot. I mean, man, I learned a lot. Visuals are super important. That you got to make sure that it looks, your Kickstarter page needs to look like a professional page. So I had an illustrator do some illustrations and made that look all nice. I had a friend who was good at video production to help with a video, and it came together, and then it was just a matter of coming up with the tiers and then getting feedback on those tiers before I actually pulled the trigger on which, what I was going to offer, how I was going to offer it, was at the right price. And there are great websites, not only websites, but also Facebook pages that are filled with people who are willing to give their advice on Kickstarter, or look at your Kickstarter and give you some advice on how, I think I initially had over 20 something tiers, and they, people were saying, oh, that's too much. That's too, so I narrowed it down to, I believe in the end, there was only 12. And then I wanted to offer a variety. That was important to me, that, that, because I think about myself as a consumer, when I back Kickstarters, what am I looking for? I usually look for an audiobook component to it, and I'm a collector of books too, so I want at least a paperback or a hardcover. The ebook doesn't mean much to me because I don't do very much ebook, but everybody there are quite a few ebook readers out there. So those are usually your lower tiered items, your ebook, and then you go up from there. And some of the really cool tiers that I came up with that I learned about from other people on those Kickstarter Facebook pages were, making it more personalized. So I had 5 tiers that allowed people to get creative and help me create characters for the second book, minor characters for the second book. And those, I was surprised at how fast those went. I mean, they were,
Fuck you.
There were 4 of them that were $250 a piece, and then there was one that was $500 a piece, and those went. They were some of the first ones to go. Yeah, wow. And people were saying, "Oh, you should have offered more 500 ones," because I saw somebody else already, because I limited it. I only offered the one $500 one, and which was for a more not a major villain, but like a henchman to the major villain in the second book. And whereas the others were minor characters, and they said, well, if you had offered more, I would have paid for the more in-depth character, which I was surprised. So, but yeah, so it was definitely a learning experience. And your family and friends, they really liked the support. I had a lot of, that's what was pretty much, really nice to see how many family and friends supported. And the one that blew me away the most, and when I lived in Florida, I was a foster dad, and I had a foster son, and we talk every now and then. I hadn't spoken to him in quite a while because he had joined the military, and he actually paid for one of the 250 tiers, which so we got to have a little Zoom meeting together and talk about the character that he wanted to make for the book. I was really excited about the first book because he said he had read it. He said he read it in one day. He liked it so much. So it was really cool. It was very bittersweet to have that connection again. So it was neat to see. And then, like I said, there were quite a few people out there from all over the world that I was like, I had no idea these people even existed.
Will there be a similar Kickstarter for the second book?
For sure. I think so. I mean, I with the success of the first one, and it did help pay for the audiobook and some of the illustrations, and I think now that more people know about the first book, I think more people will be more willing to support a Kickstarter for the second book. I don't know when that'll be, awesome. But we'll see. I'm trying to plug away on that second one. I'm hoping to get it to my editor sometime, hopefully the spring or the summer of next year, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. Yeah. Sean, hearing you talk about a 2-for-1, because I would dabble into reading short stories once in a while. Like 1,000 words was my limit, because it took me like 4 hours to read 1,000 words and edit it down. So to hear you say 2-for-1, that's incredible. It's a lot harder than it looks or than it sounds when you actually are doing it.
I have a video on my YouTube channel for aspiring narrators.
I did watch that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like I say in the video, if you can find it, look me up on YouTube. It's called "So You Want to Be an Audiobook Narrator." And when I tell, I made that, as I say in the video, I would go to parties and people would say, "Oh, audiobooks, that sounds so cool. What is it like?" And I would, being an actor, want to talk about myself. "Oh, let me just tell you." And then at the end of it, I'd say, "Well, just look me up if you're interested." And they would never follow up. So I said, now I do. Look at the video. And my students, and I have colleagues who go, look at the video, which is take a book that you're interested in, something fun, and you just sit in a little box and you record it out loud for 2 hours or 4 hours a day until it's done, And I tell performers and people who want to be performers that this is much more about temperament than it is talent. Because if you practice hard enough, your talent will get better. You will become a better narrator. Like anything we do, we practice it enough. But do you have the temperament to be that self-directed, to be in a little box that long, to maintain the level of intensity of the performance? And, if you look at the comments on that video, there every so often you'll have someone go, "Hey, I did your test and it absolutely convinced me I never ever want to do this in my entire life." And I feel as a coach, as a teacher, I'm like, I did my job. I saved them the money and time and heartache of what it actually means, because this is a lot harder than people think it is. You have to learn the software. You have to learn about mic placement. You have to learn about the clients you're auditioning for. And that's even before you get to the performance part. Oh, people tell me I have a good voice, or I read to my kids. Okay, that's great. But that's not the most important thing. I always tell my students, it's always the business side that will make the difference. How active are you on social media promoting? Are you communicating with authors? Are you going to writers' conferences? Are you talking to people? And it's a lot more. There's a lot more moving parts than people realize. And I don't want to dissuade anybody, but when I get emails every week from people all around the world, literally, and I say, watch the video, take the test, and if you pass it, don't do it halfway, but if you pass it, then come back to me. And you would be, surprise, surprise, the majority of those people do not contact me again because they're like, wow, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And, even though the cost of getting into it for equipment and so on is much less than it used to be back in the day, it's still the same. At the end of the day, it's you with a text and a microphone. And there's nobody else there directing you, and you've got to be able to figure that out. And and if you're really going to do it for real and have a career, you have to overcome that. And it's a lot more complex than people think.
Yeah, and that's just me, just dabbling, just have no edge, just goofing off. So I can imagine when you're serious about it, it's
especially if you get involved. A part you really love. I mean, when I was doing 50 books a year, if you put it on a spectrum, on the far end, on one side, you'd have about 10 books a year you absolutely loved, that were so well written, regardless of genre, fiction or nonfiction, they are really well written pieces. And so you want to rise to the level of the material. Okay? And on the other far end, you have about 10 books where they should have, shot the author and the editor at the same time. I'm sorry to say that, but that's true. And then in the middle, you have about 30 books that run the range from, wow, that was really good, to, yeah, it was okay. And it's those 30 books where you keep honing your craft, because the interesting part, or ironic part, is it takes just as much talent and expertise to show up for the really good books as it does for the really bad books. Because a great narrator can tell a good story even if the author didn't write one. And that's when it gets challenging. Oof. And when you have a really great story, you've got to rise. Like, I feel, and no, I'm not stroking his ego here, but I thought Stephen's story was really good. and I needed to rise to the level of the material. And suddenly you've got to bring your A game to that piece and deliver on the potential for the listener of making it entertaining, which is, like I said, the only yardstick that counts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to keep either of you too long, but I'm so fascinated by AI and how it's impacting our lives in different ways. So I have a question for both of you, Sean as a narrator and Stephen as an author. How concerned are you both about AI and what it may mean for us in the near future and even years from now?
I don't know.
You want to go first, Stephen?
Sure. Yeah. I don't know if concern is the right word. I think it's more of maybe disgust, I guess, is because I think AI could be used as a tool, but it also could be used as a great way to cheat things. I mean, we deal with it in schools all the time, but from a writer's perspective, there's so much that goes into writing that AI can emulate, but there's still stuff missing. Like we talked at the beginning of this episode, the world building. If AI is going to do all the world building and AI is going to do the writing based on it, I just think it's a lazy way. I wouldn't want to read something that a computer wrote. I want to read something that's got emotion, that's got, that somebody put their heart and their soul into. This is a piece that, my book. I mean, this is a labor of love that I agonized over for 15 years that I put together, and it's got some great personal moments in there that I put in there. Can AI write a good story? Maybe it can, but is it something I'm interested in? No. And I think anybody who uses it, they're kind of cheating their way into becoming a writer. I don't think writing is just putting a bunch of words together. I think it's pouring your heart and your soul into a story, and then crafting that story into something that is entertaining.
The thing about AI, well, first of all, it's not like there's a robot like Mr. Data writing this stuff. It's voice. It is literally text to voice. Now, there's Chat GPT. So if you say, write my report in the theme of Faulkner or Hemingway or Shakespeare, they'll do that. But it's always derivative, okay? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that makes great art is chaos theory. Mm-hmm. Like, who could have predicted that, like, Salvador Dali would come up with those paintings? I mean, seriously, you know what I mean? Or Picasso or Pollock or even the masters, or writers. And so what makes a piece of art, whether it's writing, a play, a book, whatever, is their particular non-rational approach to the subject that somehow still connects with us. That's what makes it interesting. And AI is always derivative. It'll sample all the Shakespeare plays to make I've done it. As a joke, I said, write this article as if it was Shakespeare. And it did it, and it's fun, it's cute. But as far as, the writing part, that's sort of outside, it'll what is it? It's derivative from whatever you pull from. But as far as performance, text to voice is already here. Phone trees, when you're on customer service stuff. A lot of people I know who are visually impaired, they rely on text-to-voice to just get information. They rely on the text-to-voice AI of the New York Times just to tell them the news. And that's great. But it's not meant to be entertaining. It's meant to be informative, which is different. Mm-hmm. When you cross that line this needs to be entertaining, AI cannot compete. And I see on message boards about authors who say, I can't wait to do just AI, it's so cheap. I'm like, you are totally screwing yourself.
Yeah.
Fiction or nonfiction. And some people say, well, my book is fiction, so AI will never take that over as a narrator. But nonfiction is just reading the book. And of course they realize they've made a fundamental mistake because nonfiction does not equal non-acting. The author has a point of view. They have an opinion and a feeling about what they're talking about in the book, whether it's Wall Street investing, astrophysics, or how to run a mile faster for exercise or yoga or whatever, right? And so AI does not have an opinion about what it is narrating, and that's the fundamental flaw. Now, I know that there's a friend of mine who's an engineer showed me that some AI programs have this little slider where you can increase the intensity of the performance by moving the slider. So basically the thing starts yelling at you. And I pointed out to him, and he's freaking out because he's thinking, oh my God, it's going to take away all of our work. And I'm like, no, all it did was yell at me. You know, one of the things that I'm moving out of fiction now into nonfiction. Paragraph by paragraph, if a paragraph is written correctly, it is a meditation on one little tiny idea, just one tiny idea. And the author had an opinion about that idea. And I, as a human being, can figure out what that opinion is and then infuse the read with that opinion. As they say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And that's no different than me interpreting dialogue in Stephen's piece. So if you have a character who says, hello, knowing what I know about that character will infuse how they say it. And AI cannot do that. Another reason, AI does not have a sense of humor or irony or sarcasm. And if you're a science fiction nerd like I am, think about Mr. Data in Star Trek. One of the underlying themes of his character was he was trying to become more human, and an ongoing gag in the show was him not understanding a humorous reference, right? Okay, that still applies for AI. Another issue that we have with AI is that they set the tempo of the read, how fast they narrate the pieces. There's literally like a knob you set on this thing. And they continue that tempo. Well, if it continues that tempo, it actually turns your brain off, because when we speak at different cadences and tempos. In fact, one of the things I tell my students is that their narration needs to be consistently inconsistent. Right? That's the way people actually think and speak. And so when God, it seems like every week I have to walk at least one of my students off the ledge because they've read some article online. AI is going to take over everything and no more audiobook. No, that's all BS. Because you want the chaos theory. Remember this really dates me, going back to Jurassic Park, right? With Jeff Goldblum, when he said, you never know how the little droplet of water rolls off his hand because of the micro changes of the skin. Well, you hire one narrator and they'll interpret the book this way. You would hire another one, they'll do it this way. But it always feels human. It has a soul. And AI cannot replicate that. It just can't. No. So frankly, I am not worried about it. Not at all.
Well, I feel better now. It's a little.
Well, and here's the thing: if from your platform, Steve, you need to tell authors don't. Like Amazon just started this thing. If you're a Kindle publishing author,
yeah, I saw that.
They will offer you a chance to do your thing as an AI thing. Don't do it. No. I'll tell you why. Because it's going to. I'm going to swear. I'm going to swear.
Go ahead.
It's going to fucking suck, because people are going to listen to it and go, "Why did they? I really hated him. He was a terrible human being." No, I really hated him. He was a terrible human being, or whatever. A performer will commit to that language because they understand how to deconstruct it. You cannot do that with AI. And if you're an author thinking, oh, I'll save a few dollars and get an audiobook out there because, I have to have an audiobook and I'll put whatever out there and it gets a bunch of crappy reviews, that could affect your career.
It is going to affect you. Because
right.
As a connoisseur of audiobooks, that's the thing that turns me off the most is picking up an audiobook or a book where the synopsis sounds really great and then you get the audiobook and the narrator is horrible. And I can't do it. I dropped the book. And I don't have time to personally sit down and actually read a book because I'm always on the run. So the best time I get to enjoy a book is an audiobook.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, so AI it's there, and it's going to, in the world of voiceover, it will have a big chunk. It'll take a bite out of like corporate and e-learning, right? But even there, they have problems with what they call retention rates. How much does the person actually remember from the experience of watching it? There was an app for a while on YouTube I saw aimed at college students where you could literally take a photograph of a textbook and have it narrated to you. But they said you should still follow along.
Yes.
And the problem being is that AI, it's just going to try its best to read the text, but it doesn't have an opinion, so it doesn't alter the read. So your brain goes into autopilot.
Yep.
And it will not remember that stuff. So it's a wasted opportunity. I'm going to be, about 10 years ago in the audiobook world, as they were exploding, suddenly you had authors, fiction and nonfiction authors, say, I want to narrate my own book. And they got that into their contract because they were, further up the chain, of being a celebrity. And they would do the book. And first of all, almost uniformly, the experience of narrating it was horrible for them.
Unless you're Neil Gaiman.
And they're like, I'll never, and like, I'll never do that again. That was ridiculous or whatever. And then the reviews came in, and suddenly it's not their fans. It's a random guy from Omaha who goes, this thing sucked. This author was a great writer, but his performance was horrible. And suddenly that affects its placement, its sales, and that can have an impact on their further books down the line. Yep. So why not hire a professional who knows how to interpret it correctly and give you the best performance that's the most entertaining possible? You know?
I agree 100%.
I'm just saying here. I'm just saying, people. That's all I'm saying.
I agree. I tell that to every time I talk to somebody when they're, I'm thinking about narrating it myself. No, please don't do it.
It's easy.
Yeah, it's just reading the text. Yeah. That's all you're doing is reading. You're just reading the book out loud, aren't you? I mean, come on.
Yeah. No big deal. I can do that in an afternoon.
Yeah, no problem. It's a walk in the park. Yeah. Go for it. Go for it.
Well, I wanted to thank both of you for coming to hang out with me today. But where can we stay up to date on the Voice Awards, and when will the winners be announced, if we know?
So December 10th is the actual awards gala and banquet in is it Beverly Hills or Los Angeles? One of those places.
It's Los Angeles, I think.
Yeah,
maybe Beverly Hills.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Stephen is flying me in on his Learjet for the two of us to go.
Yeah, I wish. Man. But it's December 10th, and I guess we'll find out that day, and then as soon as we know, we'll be blasting it out everywhere. That's for sure.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed for you. Rooting for you.
Thank you.
So in the meantime, where can listeners find both of you, Sean and Stephen? Where's the best place to find both of you? Socials or websites? Or
you can find me at seanprattpresents.com, and that's mainly my coaching site, but it has demos for my work. I'm on social media. My handle is SP Presents on Instagram, Facebook, X, and my name, Sean Allen Pratt, on LinkedIn. So that's where you can find me.
Yeah. And I'm on all those social medias as Stephen Guglich. You can also go to my website, StephenGuglich.com. And if you're having a hard time spelling Stephen Guglich, I made it easy for you. You can go to thevalsaga.com as well.
Awesome. And I will include all those links down below in the description so everyone can find it. Just click the link and take you right to it. So
that's right.
Thanks again to both of you. I really appreciate your time and hope to talk again soon.
Yes, this was great. Thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Thank you.